every time I got something I wanted, I got more enslaved to it. We have a hard time letting go of things when we justify them because we need to make sense out of why we're keeping it. So in 2010, I was letting go of an agency. I had a huge agency that I could easily justify keeping because they were giving me auditions for movies. I was justifying. So I was like, I have to let go of them. So I dropped them. And the next day, like Jim Carrey and Eckhart Tolle's people call me and ask me to come speak at a Jim Carrey Eckhart Tolle event. And the audience was full of producers of movies and stuff.
Welcome back to the You Can Too podcast. On today's show, we have transformational comedian and New York Times bestselling author. We have Kyle Cease. Honestly, if I were to go through everything that you've done, we could be here all day just going through your accomplishments. But I'd love to start for you. You started really early into comedy and everything that you started in. At 15 years old, you were at Lexus corporate events and doing so many amazing things that I think you just took initiative so young. I'm curious, what was it about your childhood that allowed you to have that openness to be able to just put yourself out there in the world?
Well, it's funny because and thanks for having me on, by the way, in response to you. Thank you for
Yeah.
the kind words. It's funny because as a kid, I think that quite a bit of us are naturally just guided and magical and free and playful. And then life teaches us it's not that easy. And I think being a kid when I started performing as a comedian really made it easy, actually, because I had not been taught that I can't do stuff. And as a kid, you just want to be seen or you want to be on stage or everyone's different. But for me, it's just like this unfolding of a comedian was already happening. When I was a little kid, my great uncle was the prop man for a comedian in the 80s named Gallagher who smashed watermelons and did prop comedy and stuff. And my grandma was a puppeteer who was famous on TV, and she was on the Carol Burnett show. And none of those people necessarily did something to like get me in the scene or anything, but it did create a world where it was normal to be in the entertainment industry.
Mm.
And at 12, I remember I just started doing comedy clubs and performing. And I remember that one day with what you mentioned, you're talking about Lexus and all those different companies. What happened there was I asked a comedian at a comedy club one day, I was like, how do comics make really good money? And he said, oh, corporate parties is a way. And then he said, you're probably too young for that. I just heard the first part, corporate parties. And back then, you're a kid, you're just like, well, how do I make that happen? And you don't think about the way that everyone thinks you have to do it. You just go, okay, how do I do corporate parties? And I heard that corporations met up at a place called the Chamber of Commerce, where different business owners meet up and they have conversations and market with each other. So at 15, I called the Chamber of Commerce in Redmond, Washington, and I said, could I get the mailing labels to all the businesses that come there? And they were like, yeah, it's $50 or something. And then I just made 500 flyers that said, are you having a corporate party and looking for entertainment? Call Kyle Cease. And all of a sudden, literally like Sears, Nintendo, Microsoft, Lexus, all these huge corporations were suddenly booking me to perform for them at 15. And I was just always creative. I know there's a quote of thinking outside the box. And for me, why have a box? Like there's no box. Like we don't have a box. Like thinking outside of a box actually creates a box. Like there's just follow what it wants and don't think within terms of box or out of a box. Like, and I remember, oh, I want to do voiceovers for kids uh educational games or cartoons or commercials. So I made a demo tape for voiceover work, and I made it was a cassette tape, and I put it in a Cracker Jack box, and I sent it to all the producers of corporate sorry, like they were producers of voiceovers for everything, like kids educational games and commercials and everything. And I started getting booked for stuff left and right, which was crazy. It was like I remember at one point I'm 16 and I'm suddenly like having to leave school to go get paid hourly a ton to like do impressions of characters for like kids educational software and different things like that. And I just really I wouldn't even say I learned, it's that I hadn't unlearned yet, that it's very easy to just create what you want if you're creative and you're open and you listen to what it's just trying to do, because there's just next steps encoded in us. And we're so busy going, well, what did everyone else do? I'm just going to do that and become like cattle. And I just realized, no, I'm just going to follow this. And so at 17, I started producing my own shows at high schools. I would like rent out the theater and charge $10 a ticket and then do these shows and do 2 night shows and start getting paid a couple grand for shows at night. And then was a real working comic a lot as a headliner at like 18, 19, booked 10 Things I Hate About You, had a principal role in that, moved to LA, booked Not Another Teen Movie, had Comedy Central career, did over 1,000 colleges as a comedian, did headlined almost every comedy club in the country and all kinds of corporates. And from 20 to like 32, I just lived on the road and performed every single day. And it was very fun.
Your journey's it is crazy. It is absolutely crazy. It's profound to say, because so much of this podcast, the reason I really created it was I had a similar perspective on unlearning. And I think when we grow up, I talked with Gay Hendricks, and he talks about the biggest thing that we need to really have in our life is wonder, the ability to wonder and wonder what it would look like, question things, and really be able to not be stuck in a box of our mind. And that's what so many people are living in, right? Is that idea of what we think is as how life is supposed to be, or how life is going to turn out for us. And so we never think bigger. We never expand what could really be possible. You started really young, and obviously, like you said, it was like the oblivious mindset of like, I don't know what can be possible, so I'm just going to see what can happen, was something that led you into everything. So was there ever like a point of self-doubt or any kind of imposter syndrome or anything that showed up for you? How did that kind of play
Well,
out?
that's what started the whole other journey, right? So it wasn't that it was imposter syndrome. It's that like, so a way that I see my career was I became this stand-up comedian and I got a bunch of love from a lot of people. I got attention
Yeah.
from my dad in a time where I felt otherwise he wasn't someone I could connect with or even felt safe to me. When
Mm.
stand-up was on, we bonded. When I was funny, we bonded, right? So I say that because without even knowing it, I basically learned how to be a comedian before I learned how to be a person. And being a comedian was a calling, but at the same time, part of me wonders if it was the highest calling I had to escape pain, to feel seen. And if we take comedy away, I don't know who I am without it. I don't know if I don't have comedy to get people's attention or get women to like me or to get, you know what I mean, my dad proud of me or whatever else. I don't know what I am without it. And I think there's a lot of things we have in our life that we could say, I don't know what I am without this. I don't know what I am with without my problem or my money, without my relationship, without my story, without my addiction. And I'm really fascinated by what I am completely. And I think that's what kind of started unfolding when one day I didn't know any of this at the time, but I was on stage and I just remember thinking to myself, I wonder if you could think about it enough if you could make yourself faint. And then I started getting worried that I could make myself faint when I was on stage. And then my mind started escalating to that would ruin my career. No one will love you. And this went from being just a passing thought to a horrible, every second, full blown anxiety that I cannot explain. But the thought got away from me and it kept being like, you're going to faint. You're going to faint when you're on stage tonight. I started getting horrified of going on stage. It got so bad that I got more creative and thought, what if you faint even off stage? And then I started thinking all the time, I can't walk. And at one point, I couldn't walk. At one point, the person that I was dating had to like hold my hand when I went places because I had anxiety, I had panic attacks. And it wasn't only that I didn't understand this thing that was under it, but also because I had toured so much that I was exhausted and I was living on drive-through and I wasn't sleeping and I was taking every gig that came in and every gig came in and I was doing 2-3 flights a day. And just in 2004, I remember just doing 68 colleges in a row without one stop, and they were all over the place. So I'd have 2-3 flights a day, and I'm in another city, another city. And then I got to 2005, and all of a sudden Comedy Central was ready for me. And I started getting paranoid. What if I faint on that? And it became this huge thing. And the beginning of my transformation is just the beginning was at one point getting to a place where I was ready to commit suicide. And I had a voice say, okay, well, you're suicidal. Why don't you go get on pills or go get anxiety medication or something? And I went to a hospital, Kaiser Permanente, and I remember sitting there in the waiting room for so long that I got 40 minutes in, and a voice goes, "Get up." And I was like, I felt this voice go, "Get up. You don't need. We're gonna learn something.
Mm.
Just get up." And it was so big because I feel like if they had moved faster at the hospital, I could have been on pills for the rest of my life and not learned any of this, not learned consciousness, not learned what causes this. But this was really the beginning of a whole new life of not only exploring what I can do as a performer, but I'm even more fascinated by exploring what I am. And so much of what we think we are is like, I am this accomplishment or this money or this thing. And it's like, no, that means if that goes away, you're dead. Like, right. And I'm really fascinated by what I am and what you are and what we are, and really learning that a lot of what we're doing, I got to go be the number one or the best at this or whatever, is to bury, because I'm scared that I'm not loved or not enough or a failure. Because in my childhood, I learned that if I'm a failure, I'm beaten, or if in my childhood, if you're not enough, you're shamed or abandoned. These are patterns that live in all of our bodies, right? And I was unconscious of those patterns. So the very beginning of it was the changing of my thinking. So I get out of the hospital, I don't get the pills, I just walk out and I go to a bookstore and I type in books on anxiety, and it took me to the self-help section. And then that was the first time I thought of, oh, I've heard of Tony Robbins. So I get a Tony Robbins book, and he says, yeah, you can't not think about something, because my biggest fear is I can't stop thinking about fainting on stage. And he said, but you also can't think of two things at the same time. So I started realizing, what if instead of focusing on don't faint on Comedy Central, I focus on how do I have the number one Comedy Central special? And this is in 2005. So I started doing this thing every day where I'm talking about my special. Oh my God, it's the best special in the world. Everyone loves it. They give me another special. And all of a sudden, I looked back at the anxiety and it was losing its grip. I was like ascending. I was moving to a new level of consciousness where I started learning for the first time. What I was learning back then was you can change your thinking and you can take the reins of your thinking. And right around that time, almost as if to match it, The Secret came out and said, do you want to learn how to achieve what you want and everything? And that matched where I was at the time. That's not where I am now, but at the time it was like the beginning of learning how to change my thinking. And from 2005 to 2000 to 2010, I was really fascinated by how I can make things happen by putting my focus on it, right? And that's a thing we've hear a lot, learning law of attraction, manifestation. That's awesome, and there's truth in it. But then 2010 was the beginning of me having to release control.
Mm.
So, because you hear in 2005 to 2010, I'm still controlling the circumstance. How can I have the number one Comedy Central special? Really, I'm still saying, if I don't, I'm not enough, or I'm depressed, or why even live? So in 2010, it became the beginning of the releasing of control. And life put me in situations where I had to end what my opinion of what people thought of me. As you get bigger, just people crap on you and don't understand you, and they're pissed off that you're becoming successful, and it's a reminder to them they're not, or that they're, even if you do something that's different than they would do. If someone stayed married for 50 years and then you decide you're not aligned in your relationship and you get a divorce, the people that stayed married for 50 years might get mad at you because you're a reminder to them they could have let go. You know what I mean? And so in 2010, I started the process of learning to let go of control and leave the world of the make it happen world and move to a world of vibration. And by vibration, I mean follow what calls to your soul, even if it makes no sense, and let go of what feels heavy, even if it makes no sense. And this really started a deeper level of the transcending of the stuff that was in my body, and took me to a world of miracles where I just would follow, okay, like this food feels addictive to me, let go of it. I'm off Facebook, I'm not dating for a while. And then at one point, even my stand-up comedy career felt heavy. It was like, I don't want to go do it, it feels heavy now. So I started in 2010 the follow the frequency feeling of expansion and let go of the things that feel heavy in my life. And that was when I ended up noticing comedy feels heavy, but I made space when I let go of it for new ideas and new possibilities. And I started going, what if I combine comedy and transformation? And I remember my ego going, the way you want to do it, no one's ever done that. And my soul was like, no one's ever done that. Like, it's my own field. Like, what if I bring comedy into the spiritual world and the self-help world? And all of a sudden the work went through the roof. I had this whole new thing where I created this thing called Evolving Out Loud. And Evolving Out Loud is me following my highest guidance and teaching what it's saying. And it's really me coaching myself. Because I always say, have you ever given someone's advice and then you learn from the advice you gave them? Like, you could be like, you sometimes you give them advice they're not asking. They go, I have a stomach ache, and you're like, I think you should break up with her. And you realize, oh, I'm giving myself advice. So if there's two yous, there's a you that gives advice and a you that learns from it. There must be two yous. There's a you that knows the truth and a you that's an egoic construct that follows what it says. And so I spent 2010 to 2020 following the highest things that I could find and letting go of what felt heavy. In 2020, the world and I together, I think, discovered when we're only following the positive, we're almost shaming the negative. And what if the energy that's negative in our body, guilt, fear of failing, not enough, abandonment, also needs to be loved? And what if we're here to learn unconditional love for every feeling that's in our body, everything that's going on? It's almost as if now, by being here, which is different than going to high in the 2010s, right? Being here holds space for everything. Being here holds space for the shame, the fear, the part of you that you think is bad, the part of you that's off, so that it can alchemize it. So for me, I'm really now in the work of between 2020 and 2023 and beyond, I'm sure, becoming now and becoming merging with the now, and not necessarily just going higher is better. Now it's like everything that's showing up in this field needs to be seen. And when it's seen, it changes. So it's almost eliminating the part of me that does things, the part of me that goes, what do I do next? That's not a thing. Because if you take every what do I do, you could almost find the pattern under it. Like, what do I do next so that I'm not a failure? What do I do so that I'm not enough? What do I do so that I can fix this guilt? And I'm more fascinated by that thing that you're deeper scared of. Like, what's the problem versus what's the solution? And let's look at it, because there might be a pattern in your body that feels unlovable. And maybe you need to hear, you're allowed to feel unlovable in my body. Maybe there's a pattern that feels you're not enough. Maybe you need to hear you're allowed to be not enough in my body, and understand unconditional love loves everything, even your sins, even your problems, even your guilt, even your mistakes, even your regret. And so that's literally from 12 till now, like this kind of jump of like, it was first just ambition, moving to you can change your thinking to higher accomplishments, then to just move based on vibration and let go of the circumstances. Then now it's be here. And I'm sure if it's the same as the other patterns, it takes about 10 to 13 years for me to learn each of the frequencies, each of the things, and become a black belt basically at that thing, right? So now I'm really learning the now, and I'm learning that everything is transcendable in the now. And it's not just only push away what feels dark and only invite what feels light. Everything is light. And so it's really grounding and moving me from higher and better to hearer and hearer. I don't know if that makes sense or
Makes a
how
lot
that,
of sense. It
yeah.
makes so much sense. And your story it's profound. Again, I'm going to continue saying that throughout this podcast. And it's a big reason I wanted you on was I resonate so much with what you're saying. And I feel like I'm in the phase of the unlearning, the letting go. I'm literally reading, I don't know if you've read it. I assume you have, Letting Go by David Hawking right now.
Dude, David Hawkins is my all-time favorite. I think he's the best.
He is the best. And when the way that you explained yourself was Jim Carrey and Eckhart Tolle. And those are like my two people that I look at in such a way. And it makes so much sense. And I feel as though a lot of people are in the phase right now where they see their life as a self-improvement project. Like I need to be improving or I'm not worthy. It's kind of like the beginning phase of you getting into, okay, I can realize that the negative isn't great, so I can change my focus. But if you're changing your focus, you're still trying to improve upon something that from a place of unworthiness, right? And that's
Yeah.
where I think a lot of people get stuck is we come from that place. We come from a place of shame instead of a place of love, like you state. And it's really hard to unlearn that, or really just be able to contextualize it and understand it and recognize that like I am enough as I am, and I can still be improving, but it's not from a place of I need to become more or anything like that, but more so this is my purpose, right? Leaning into what you said earlier. And it's so important to take this perspective. And I'm, like I said, I'm in this kind of this phase now. What do you feel like was the biggest unlearning for you throughout that phase for you to step into the letting go and to allow you to be more present where you are?
Mm. Dude, how old are you?
Just turned 20.
What the hell? I've never seen that level of awakening at that young of an age.
I appreciate it. I started
Congratulations.
this at 17, so I'm at it.
But even starting at 17, I took 10 years to just go through the achievement phase of my life. So, I mean, I just
Yeah,
want to acknowledge you
I appreciate it.
and tell you I'm so blown away by how awake you are and aware. That's insane. Like you're just such a light worker on our planet. I hope you know that you're handed a gift, and that's, I just want to celebrate with you how awake you are and what maybe you represent as the next generation that's coming through of just light and learning and love, because that's really exciting for me that a 20-year-old can talk to me this way, because I can hear how much you're meeting me here,
Yeah,
so that's beautiful.
I appreciate that.
um I think Letting Go is an amazing book, and I think that Hawkins has so many. Hawkins has books that a lot of people won't get, even because they're so high and so
Hmm.
good. And one is my favorite, I think, is Discovery of the Presence of God. I don't know if you know that one,
I don't.
but
I just got Power versus Force though, so I'm going to be reading that
oh,
next.
that's a great book too. I mean, that's the one that, so Power versus Force is incredible, and it's a great introductory book to people, because it would meet people at many levels of consciousness, right?
Mm.
And if you understand the scale of 200 to 500, whatever,
Yep,
I
yep.
feel like Discovery of the Presence of God is a book for people in the 500s to go to 600. So,
Mhm.
a lot of people in the 300s wouldn't understand anything, because if you're
Yeah,
just about intellectual and not about awareness and unconditional love, the book doesn't make sense. So, people that are like, they understand knowledge based things, like I understand how it works mentally, but I
yeah,
don't get awareness, they wouldn't get that book. And so to have you talk there is so exciting, because if you think of the book, he's like, when people hit 500 and 600, they start counterbalancing millions under
mm,
200. So we're creating a higher collective field right now, right? That makes it more and more impossible for control or wars or anything to actually happen. You'll see attempts at it, but you'll notice they don't quite make it happen, because there's too much light on them, and it's too impossible to create manipulative agendas and control the world, because we see it. And you need
yeah,
secrecy and long planning to pull off this stuff, and no one can do it now, because we can't even control our own future now, because we're moving timelines so quick. Do you get what I mean by that?
absolutely.
Like if you're like, here's my plan for the next year, I'm like, good luck, because you're looking at one floor, but you're on an elevator, and the
Hmm.
elevator is going to pass that floor tomorrow, and you're sitting here with your plan over here. And it's more and more letting go undoes yourself from letting go of a specific plan or agenda. You can still show up and like run a podcast like this and have events or whatever, but your long-term plan for what's going to happen in a long time from now, like for instance, getting married could be like a difficult thing if you're ascending, because you're like, all right, we're together forever, yet you're going to outlive the you that they married in a
Yeah,
second. So hopefully they're both evolving too. For me, I would say it's an ongoing thing of constant, like when you said, what's your biggest one? There's so many, honestly,
yeah,
that it's always living this. I would say for me, I'm much more about living what the highest is and bringing that to what I do, versus at all focusing on what do I do for my career. It is a living with guidance. It is a living with the now. It is a constant 24/7 stream of lessons that's happening right now. everything I'm doing. I am literally like, it's like when we're done with this call, I'll probably stand up and be like, okay, am I supposed to clean the house? Am I supposed to learn, this? Am I supposed to not eat right now? Like there's everything is like it's not an egoic, what do I want to get? It's like, okay, now what is here and what is being heard and what needs to be heard. But it's been through a combination of things. And one of the things I've noticed is always having to face everything you're scared of happening, whether it's public ridicule, whether it's people not understanding you, whether it's I think that everything in our body that we're most scared of happening, very often the universe needs to make sure you experience so you can see you're alive without it. So if you're in a place where you're like, oh my God, what if I go broke? What if I go broke? It's almost like God has to go, okay, make this person broke so they can get to the root of that fear and release the trauma that's under the broke, right? Because maybe you have in your body that if you're broke, then you're not loved by your mom, or if you're broke, you'll be beaten by your dad. All these kind of things are in there. So whatever your biggest fear is, life has to take it away from you or make you face it so that you can see you're alive without it, and so that you can alchemize the trauma that's under it, right? So my life has been that. It's been a lot of letting go. And some of what it makes me let go of is what was a lesson in the past, like what was an amazing thing, like lessons that I went through, like eating a certain way or letting go in a certain way and moving to a higher frequency in 2010. None of those lessons work now. Like it's like learning something in fourth grade, but now you're a Harvard senior, and it's like, yeah, fourth grade won't work. So it's amazing because life is always making you learn a new lesson. And when you're really struggling, that's because you keep trying to apply an old lesson that doesn't work now. Like bringing in, I learned cursive in third grade doesn't work when you're a senior, right? So like you can't, so it makes you keep uncovering new truths about yourself. And that's what I'm always doing. I'm constantly going, okay, I'm listening, and I am up for whatever needs to unfold, and I don't understand what it is. And it goes, yeah, lose your understander even.
Mm-hmm.
So life has been a series of constant ongoing lessons of, okay, now you feel pain here. Okay, do you think the pain that you're feeling is about the thing that's happening, or is it trying to bring up something before? And getting so present for all of that. And really, I feel like where it's slowly taking me to is leaving the story of Kyle and moving into how God sees the world. Because one thing I notice is God sees everything. God can, how can there be a couple with an argument? Each person thinks their side is right, but they both have a point that's valid, and they feel like they conflict. From God's perspective, like stepping back at a 180, this point is accurate and this point is accurate even if they conflict. Also from God's perspective, there is the ability to have dark things, murder and war and everything. Obviously, we never want to do that, but we want to bring compassion to the energy that exists,
Mm-hmm.
not so that you can keep it going, but once you see something, you alchemize it. Like it's like there's an energy we have, like, oh my God, I don't want that, I don't want that. Then it happens, and then you finally see it and acknowledge it and go through stages of grief. That changes it. Just the seeing of something changes it. That's what that moment is when you realize something and start to cry and this forgiveness comes through. What happened? You saw something in your body that you couldn't see a week ago. And all of a sudden, the tears are its release. So seeing is freeing it, right? And so life to me is going, I'm just going to show you this now. This was stored in your body, whether it's from childhood or a past life or ancestral trauma or whatever, that exists. And I'm going to show you this now. And I want you to see it and understand it and be there for that you. Or maybe it's going, I want you to cry out someone else's pain. I want you to cry out the world's pain. I want you to whatever. And you're making the world better and better because you're moving yourself to a more and more neutral, unconditional 0 point loving frequency. And that frequency can alchemize the planet. And I feel like you and I and the world is going up in frequency. And some people don't want to, so they are going down in frequency. Like they're going, no, I'm going to addiction this more, but that won't work. And the addictions and the darker, constant, never look at yourself thing isn't going to work. And, you know, they will have to either let go or it won't work. And so, because the collective frequency is too high now for control to be in charge, and we're moving to a frequency of surrender. And surrender meaning just see what it is and love it, versus say it shouldn't be, is going to be the way that we move in the future.
So much there. There's so much there. Every time you speak, it's like I have so many things I want to say. I love it. It makes me think of your journey specifically, is like you were going touring, doing so much, so many things in just one day. You never allowed yourself to actually take a look at yourself. A quote that I
Right.
love is, all that matters is how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself. And for many of us, we don't give ourselves to be by ourselves, let alone understand how we even feel about ourselves when we're by ourselves. And so
Right.
we're in a constant state of going, 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 never allowing ourselves to actually be and recognize that we are enough as we are, rather than going towards something. It's like the Jim Carrey quote of like, I wish everyone would get rich and famous to realize that it's not everything that they'd want, right? And I
Yeah.
think when we're in that constant state, when we over glamorize this next level or this achievement or this goal, we disconnect from the very moment that we're a part of. And there's a quote that I wanted to bring up from that you spoke about, is that if you don't keep creating, your mind will creatively sabotage you. And
Yeah.
it's so important. I'd love for you to dive into that, because I think
Yeah.
as much as we understand this kind of stuff, like really seeping it in, and your stories are a great way to understand it. So I'd love for you to break that down.
Yeah. Well, it's weird because I said that quote in like 2005 or 2006, and I would
Yeah.
now actually modify it in the consciousness we're into. Literally, creation is trying to happen through you. And if
Mm,
you allow it to, amazing, powerful things are just, God's just trying to work through you.
yeah.
Um, but when you keep yourself at a lower grade, meaning you spend the day flipping through social media,
Mm-hmm.
stay in a job that doesn't align, stay in a relationship that isn't your truth, and you use these things as old addictions and energetic things to grab onto, so you don't have to really meet you, which actually is where all the miracles are. You will creatively sabotage because you keep creating, but if you keep holding on to an old world thing that's not your truth, you're going to create from a lower frequency. So that's what anxiety is, the mind coming up with all the ways everything could go wrong. That's what worry is. Like you don't have to live in a world of worry, but if you're really think about, it's a matter, I think that when we get anxiety and worry and everything, it's because we're geniuses living in a lower frequency. I know I use this already, but really imagine a senior in Harvard going to third grade, how bored they'd be, how stagnant they'd be, how much they're not at their heart's edge and they're learning. It'd be a butterfly has to clip its wings and be with the caterpillars. It's like that will create depression and anger and make you mad at the world and make you create negative things, make you create judgment for other people, make you create hate, make you move that way. Right. So, this is why to me it's so important to free yourself from the addiction of living in the constant future and thinking over there is better. And like you said, that Jim Carrey quote, I sure never hit Jim Carrey level of fame, but I sure understand getting everything I want. And it just being this, like, you did it, got it. Now what? It's just like, it's not anything. In fact, if it's the answer to my life, I noticed how much I would be scared of losing it now. So when
Yeah.
I booked Not Another Teen Movie, it was such a funny process because I would be like, just get me the audition. And then I got the audition. Just get me to producers. I get to producers. Okay, you booked the movie. Just get me the movie, please. I'll nail it. I nail the part. But then I'm waiting 9 months for them to edit it. And I don't know if they pulled my part out or not. So I spent 9 months paranoid that I would be pulled from it. I got what I wanted and I spent the whole time worrying. Then I get I'm in the movie and it made it. And I'm like, please be a hit and please get the next movie. And just
Yeah.
more, every time I got something I wanted, I got more enslaved to it because it's the answer to my life. So it better not leave. Right.
Yeah.
And that's the funny thing is like, don't trick yourself into getting a circumstance that you want will make you happy. It will make you go, what's next? And don't leave me. Instead of going for what do I want in the physical world, still have that, but ask yourself, what would evolve me out of the part of me that has this addictive thing that thinks that I'll be happy when I accomplish something? Still, you can have things, but don't think that the things will ever complete you. You're here to learn fully what you are, and you'll discover you're completely complete, you're infinite, And everything that you think is the answer is a dream that is helping you escape the completion of what you are. So find your completeness first. Ask yourself, what would move me towards more me, and what's me moving towards the patterns that I learned in my childhood to stay the small self that hopes that it's not hurt or abandoned again. Like, you're either moving towards the true you, or you're moving away from it, moving towards the old software of what you were taught you are that you're not. And one will feel freer and better gradually, and one will feel more and more tense and horrible, and you'll have to have addictions to keep going in that. But the real you is infinite creator. The real you can create better than your favorite band, than your favorite comedian, everything. And then we go, yeah, right. And when you look at your past, but you still never lived in the true you that God's working through. So so yeah, if you're holding on to some stagnant thing, you're cutting yourself off from the flow of ongoing 24/7 creativity that is so constant for me that I have to just allow it to come up and not even create everything it says. Like, it's like going, here's an idea, here's a video, here's a short, here's a book, here's whatever. And sometimes I'll just sit there and watch them pass,
Yeah.
and just be like, and just become the creative space that some of it comes out, but not even get addicted to, I have to create everything. Sometimes, like Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys, he like has 20 songs a day or something going through his head. He's not going to make an album every day. He just starts playing chords and then pass. And I saw an interview with his wife once, and she said, the amount of songs that I've heard that no one will ever hear that Brian Wilson created, it blows my mind. So you can even become a creative being, and you don't have to get everything out. Just start to connect to the flow of the abundance of constant creativity that you are, and you'll be shocked at what the hell happens to you, right?
It's so true. The thing that one of my first coach told me was that you do a disservice. Well, I guess I said it, but it was something that he said that came to me, was that you do a disservice by not bringing your unique gifts into the world. I think so
Yeah.
many of us are going through life, working at a job that they don't enjoy, or doing something that they don't feel aligned with. And then they never take a step into something that they know they kind of feel a little bit aligned with. Like this podcast, I started in my car, no like solo episodes for 100 episodes, wasn't able to get people on the podcast at the time, but I was like, I feel like this is the path I should go down. And it wasn't focusing on the result, but it was more focusing on, is this the direction that I want to go in? And that was the only thought that I was thinking. And doing
Good
that was
job.
like, it was just doing that, and doing it every single week. And now it's a solo episode, and it's an interview every single week. And I appreciate you for that, because it's evolved so much. And then there's of course so much I want to do, so much further along. But like you said, it's like, it's not getting to if I got to the end point and I stopped doing interviews, that's kind of like, why would I do that? That the whole purpose is to have an interview every single week. There is no end point that I'm trying to get to, but doing this every single week is. And I think when we look at that through the lens of whatever we're doing, well, we're going to enjoy a hell of a lot more. But I think that part of ourselves, that the shadow, I guess you can call it, that we don't want to face, that we don't want to bring up, that we don't want to address because we don't want to give ourselves the time. What do you feel throughout your journey, or even the people that you've worked with? You've worked with thousands of people one-on-one just the past few years. What do you feel has allowed people to face that inner darkness that they don't want to face, and come from a place of grace and love, like you say?
I think the fact that the darkness is unavoidable now. It's
Yeah.
almost like before, an analogy I've used is, I feel like we've been able to water ski above the ocean of our soul and stay on top of it with our circumstances. Like before 2020, maybe you had a decent enough job, you didn't have to look at anything. Maybe you had the ability to travel or go to restaurants anytime you wanted. There was no pattern break there. And then all of a sudden, no matter what you feel politically about the mass and everything, I'm sure not an advocate on all that stuff. I just mean, if you look at it from God's perspective, God's like, okay, everyone, be in your house for 2 years. Make it impossible to talk to people at the store because you're masked. Like, all of a sudden, the benefits of that are like, I have to hear what's inside my body. I have to hear what's in here, right? And it's not a coincidence that in this time, so much other darkness is coming up publicly, like who the government really is and what the media was doing, and how they're all, and also how we have the capacity to hear other dark things happening. Like, child trafficking existed in the 80s too, but no one wanted to talk about it because they were in their own entrepreneurial, everything's fine world. And why would I'm not even going to talk about that, or what's happening to people that are in other places, or animals, or whatever else. It's just now really like now we are all having to go in and look at what's both in our body. It's almost like God is going, all the abuse you went through in your past, we're going to alchemize now. We're going to see it and cry it out. So you stop being a character that you created to not feel that trauma again. And so the world is doing the same thing. Like it's just bringing to light all kinds of stuff. And the people that were controlling things can't now because it's all coming up. So collectively and individually, all of our darkness is too loud, and it makes our little addictive, next step that we have as an achievement to block this impossible, because you can't help but see this at one level. So it's almost like God's like aiming that flashlight more and more in the gut and the chest where all the pain is, and it's just like here, and you're sitting here going, maybe I'll have a drink, and it's just like the real thing's here. All of this is just sentences, and you can't run from it anymore, right? So that's great. Like, that's awesome that we now are like, it's so Hawkins-esque that we're removing all of the lies that are in our bodies. All of the us's that we created out of avoiding trauma is coming out of the body. All of the stories of our not enoughness, all of our I'm a failure, all of how we were raised as the truth is all leaving. And we just have to get really present and look at it and stop running from it. But it's now at a point where you can't avoid it. And all of the shame that's in our body and guilt and fear and everything is just coming to light. And if you understand that's what's going on, you can collaborate with the universe and participate in this. And it's amazing. If you don't, and you think you are the pattern that you created to avoid trauma, this is a horrifying time. And when you hear a lot about the 3D, 5D split, when you hear people talk about the split between the two worlds, right? That's what that is, in my opinion. You're either the now and you're letting the false you die, or you're the false you and you're protecting the false you. And some people are going to go to the grave protecting that lie, because they think that if I feel it, without them consciously knowing this, they
Yeah.
think that if I feel that lie, I'll be abused again. And so everything is don't be hurt for some people, and everything is hurt me all you want in order to liberate me. So you're either on the operating table letting it remove the lies, or you're protecting yourself and going down with the lies.
It's so powerful to hear you speak about this kind of stuff because, as you said, most of it for most people is unconscious. And so they're going through a life of just kind of like sleeping through a life, missing out on everything that could be possible because they're suppressing parts of themselves that they don't want to address, or they are unconsciously not recognizing that they're suppressing or repressing. And it's so important to take this kind of perspective. And there's another quote I want to bring up for you, is that if you are justifying keeping something, you have to let go of it. Yes. And it's like people are doing this unconsciously, justifying the life that they don't want because they think that the life that they do want, or the person that they can become, is just not an option. You started young, as we spoke earlier, is like you started young, recognizing that that didn't have to be that way in comedy and in your career. But internally, when did that become prominent for you? When was that time for you?
That the revelation about justifying something.
Mm-hmm.
So that was in 2010 when I was really understanding this principle that I worked with my friend Diego, and he said this point that we realized: when you let go of something, the only reason you stress is your mind can measure what you will lose and it can't see what you'll gain. And there are a lot of times where we're holding on to things that are not us. And one way that we can help ourselves hold on to things that are not us and not a part of us is to justify it. To give you an example, how weird would it be if I talked about my 6-year-old daughter with justification? Like, wouldn't it be weird if I'm like, well, she does get good medical, so I'll keep being her dad, right? That would be like, what? Or if you're on a date with someone and they were like, you know what? I like your hair, so I'll date you, right? You'd be like, this person doesn't like me,
Yeah.
right? So we're using justification. And I don't justify my job. It's like my calling and it's here. I don't justify meditating. But we do know what it's like to be like, yeah, that person treats me like crap, but they took me to a nice dinner once. Or I hate this job, but I will get a promotion later. What you're doing in that moment is you're making your mind make sense out of why you're ignoring your heart. And by activating your mind and your ego to ignore your heart, you're moving into your ego by making that decision. It's more in charge than the heart. When you let go and you follow the heart, it lets go of the ego. So justifying is a way to, if you find yourself going, I this relationship isn't aligned, even if it's a positive thing, like this job isn't good for me, but it's a great job. I should be thankful for this job. That first sentence was telling the truth, and now you're making a thing that does exist. You should be thankful for everything, but just because something's even amazing doesn't mean it's your calling. There's even better than that sometimes that's coming in. And so we have a hard time letting go of things when we justify them, because we need to make sense out of why we're keeping it. So in 2010, I was I was letting go of an agency. I had a huge agency that I could easily justify keeping because they were giving me auditions for movies. But I heard my heart go, yeah, but they don't want me to be the speaker that I am. They don't align. They're taking 10% of the gigs that I'm getting on my own. They're
Yeah.
heavy, right? And I heard my body go, I want to let go of them. But the justification was, but they get me auditions. I won't have any auditions for movies or anything anymore. And I was justifying. So I was like, I have to let go of them. So I dropped them. And the next day, like Jim Carrey and Eckhart Tolle's people call me and asked me to come speak at a Jim Carrey Eckhart Tolle event. And the audience was full of producers of movies and stuff. And I'm sitting there in this free frequency of just fully finding my voice, that I now am a person that was eating different, was done with addictive things, all kinds of different patterns, was off social media, was let go of my dream career and fired the biggest agency in Hollywood. All of a sudden now I'm in this place of total, I am enough, and I'm just as enough as Jim Carrey and Eckhart Tolle. I'm not some unworthy kid that's with them. I'm really enough, and I'm free. And so I did a set in front of them and killed like you wouldn't believe, to Jim Carrey and Eckhart Tolle at the Saban Theater, and hung with them for hours after, and really started understanding this thing that like I almost kept the agency, which would have kept something that didn't align, which would have made me feel heavier, which would have made me feel unworthier, which would have made me perform from a more please like me place. Everything was different when I let go of it. But my justification almost kept it. But I heard myself go, I'm justifying, I have to let go of it. Because when you follow your heart, there's no explanation for why. Right.
I align so much with that. And I think when you do step into that, there's no way to explain that. There's no way
Right.
to contextualize it until you've done it, right? And I spoke with Light Watkins a few weeks ago, and it's like it's trusting your heart voice and being able to do that in everything that you do, instead of listening to your mind that's automatically going to produce an answer that you don't want, or a future that you really don't want to attract yourself into. I see a continuous pattern for you, and it's that you play to win, you don't play not to lose. And I think that a lot of people are going through life through that lens, and whether it's with money or with success or accomplishments or whatever that looks like, and you talk a lot about money, I'd love to dive into that as well. It's like,
Sure.
how can we start playing to win instead of playing not to lose?
Mm. Well, not to lose is fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes to win is fear too, if it has
Mm-hmm.
the same tone as not to lose, even if we're saying
Yeah.
the word win.
Yeah.
I would say, I'm here for my soul's freedom,
Mm-hmm.
and everything is what is taking me closer to the truth. The truth is not painful. I mean, the truth can bring up the lies that need to be deleted,
Yeah.
but and that can be painful if you're attached to them. But the truth isn't painful at all. It like, meaning like the truth of what you are. I don't mean the truth of the
Of
ins and
course.
outs in the third D world of what the government's doing or whatever. The truth of what you are isn't painful. And so I'm here for that truth. I'm here for the knowing of what I am. And um, that's what I'm playing for. Like literally every decision is, does that move me closer towards this kind of open-ended unknown that I know will release some more false me, and then will be alchemized with more magical things that move me and guide me faster, right? And that's what playing to win is. It doesn't mean like playing that I get to 1 million followers, or that I,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's playing to soul, playing
Yeah.
to truth, playing to what am I, you know?
Yeah.
That's my biggest thing too, is my intention. I have the intention of knowing what I truly am. That's what my intention is. That's the highest in the hierarchy of everything, right? Bigger than everything. Know what I truly am, and then bring that into everything. Bring that into parenting, bring that into being a friend, right? Or whatever. I want to know what I truly am. So if things seem to be going bad, I know they're moving me towards what I truly am. And they're hitting all the trauma patterns that are what I'm not so they can disappear. If things are going good, I'm moving towards what I truly am, right? Every single thing is that, right? So that's my intention is what am I,
Mm-hmm.
right? I want to know what I am because more than what can I do, right? What can I do could have a false me that's still doing stuff out of don't hurt me. And what if I go, no, what am I? From there, what is done is bigger because I'm in a bit bigger frequency of the now, right? So that's what my fascination is. What am I?
Yeah, it is fascinating. And when you step into that, I think it's a constant, you have to consistently remind yourself of that being the intention. Because if we go through life, a lot of people are going through life just sleeping, not really being intentional about the life that they want or the person that they want to become or the kind of presence that they want to cultivate. And it seems like you come from a place of abundance in almost everything that you do, and you just believe that that's the way the world is abundant, and I'm in full support of that. And whether it comes to money or success, I go back to it, but I think a lot of people have a scarcity towards money. They have a scarcity towards what success is, or whatever the definition of success is, or what they believe they're capable of achieving or accomplishing. How can people come from a place of abundance rather than scarcity? Maybe they believe they come from scarcity. Maybe they believe that they deserve scarcity. Um,
Mm.
what do you say to that?
It's a thing that I do take for granted that it is a given to me that everything is happening for me, for my expansion. It
Yes.
is so wired in my body as a fact. Everything that falls apart is taking me to something higher. Everything that's going great is taking me to something higher. And I don't know why I know that, but there's nothing like literally the whole world could blow up and I'd be like, what are we going to become? Like what, like everything is for that. Even if we all die tomorrow, I'm like, ooh, what's the next life? Like, like what's the trauma from that that's going to be alchemized or whatever. It's just like everything is on purpose. I remember seeing an interview with someone, I can't remember who, but they said literally the factor of everything is what your perception is that it means versus like, they've done studies where they took people that all did, they took 100 people that all did the same thing, but they told 50 people this is like it was about stress. Some people think
Yeah.
stress is bad, so they're like, oh, I can't feel any stress. And some people go, stress makes me grow. So I love feeling stress because you know what I'm saying? I'm
Yeah.
in my body, like everything is making me grow. It's just a fact. Everything is getting me closer to the now version of me. And
Mhm.
it's been that way my whole life. And I think that when I went through suicidal anxiety and then Tony Robbins my way into a number one special, a number one Comedy Central special, I started associating, wow, the anxiety was
Mhm.
good for me. And
Mhm.
that might have been the real start of it. But I've known that my whole life I've had nothing but optimism in me. I almost oblivion. Like I feel bad because in high school and junior high, I remember when I would get really positive things. I remember getting a show that I was going to be on a star search type show and just going to school and telling every person that that was
Yeah.
happening and didn't even realize till like 30 that maybe they were hearing it as bragging or better than, but I was trying to get them to get they could too. Like
Yeah.
everything I'm doing was like to be like that's available for you, but like, if they're depressed and they're in a mindset of nothing's possible for them and I come tap dancing in and be like, but to me like everything is good news. So it's weird because I'll do events and someone will be like, I'm in the middle of a divorce, and I'm like, yay, congratulations, like you're free, like everything means that. And I don't mean that with an instant optimism that negates the pain. I mean,
Mhm.
that's just true. And it might require the alchemization of the pain. But to
Mhm.
me, when you alchemize something, when you take something that was a lie in your body and you hear it enough to where it becomes tears and then it permanently is gone, you literally start a new life that minute because you've never known you without that. So I feel like I'm just getting lighter and freer every day. I feel like I'm getting younger every day. I feel like I'm moving to a place of just nothing but freedom. And the people that were really conscious as speakers and comedians and everything, I feel like they got better and better as they got older. Like George Carlin and Wayne Dyer and Michael Beckwith gets younger and younger. He's in his 70s, and Esther Hicks and these people, as they move in consciousness, they seem to get they don't get older, they get freer. And more and more alchemized because they're talking from such a high frequency. And so I'm like, God, I'm going to be like 10 in a few years, like I'm going to get younger and younger because like I have less and less lies in my body and less addictions and less and, and really see from here how what Hawkins would say is everything is based on your subconscious belief. So he, in the book Healing and Recovery, says, if you believe in your subconscious because it was trained into you that eggs will give you cholesterol, and you saw people in doctor's coats saying that, it's that belief that's stored in your body that makes the eggs give you cholesterol, not the eggs. They're just the placebo for the cholesterol,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it's our subconscious that I believe is not only doing everything as far as our health, our mindset, it's also affecting the world. It's that we believe that, that war is bad, that makes us suddenly resist it, which could make more of it. But when you start to go, okay, that's here, I'm going to learn to feel a level of compassion for it. That can make you cry it out, and it can make it disappear, right? Because you're not at the subconscious of what you've decided the world should be. You're at a listening and a seeing, which suddenly makes it change. And it's like a quantum field kind of thing, right? So yeah, so I believe that everything in the world truly is here to help you. It's to help you learn new things. Some stuff I went through in the last few years has brought me to a place of tapping into a masculine side of me. Like I'm fascinated by, like I have my Tesla still, but I switched to a pickup truck. I eat meat now, which I have mixed feelings about because I really sometimes go, is that wrong? And I feel for the animals. I feel compassion, but I almost feel like my body is making me go through a phase of like acknowledging that exists and really that other people believe it's the truth, and watching as my body goes, thank you for not being in resistance to what is. And suddenly it lost like 12 pounds like within a couple weeks of eating meat, and felt grounded. And it felt like in the old world from 2010 to 2020 I was in this kind of higher frequency. And now it's more of a grounding that it wants me to learn. And I don't understand if really I'm supposed to eat meat or not. I've had really a difficult time with that because it feels wrong to me on a spiritual level.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, my body might be going, I just want to alchemize your belief in resistance and go through something. I don't know. And then life goes, animals eat other animals, right? Like, and they're not nice about it. I've seen alligators do horrible things to zebras and all kinds of stuff, right? So I've been in my own inner thing, but also it brings up my protector. I'm really into jujitsu right now and into, flipping people and putting them in chokeholds, because instead of just being like everything is love and everything's perfect, well, if a dude breaks into the house and I can't love him out of the house, I'm going to protect my daughter, or if
Yeah.
someone is attacking me, I'm going to protect myself and not be scared to file a lawsuit if I need to, or whatever else, right? And I've been all about love in a way that's almost negating the primal man that I am. So I noticed this year that guy's showing up, and it goes, learn jujitsu, help kids be not trafficked, eat more meat at least for a while, get a tinted window giant high up truck like you're everything that you used to make fun of,
Yeah.
and learn to protect yourself and learn to have boundaries and not just see only, that like the shadow to seeing the good in everything has been seeing the good in people that have not seen it in themselves yet, and
Mm-hmm.
giving really like opening your heart and door to people that were taking advantage of it. And I still see the light in what everyone is, but I've
Yeah.
really found myself being fascinated by boundarying off people and saying no more. And my optimism for them has hurt me at times. Does that make sense? Like,
Absolutely.
you can stay in a relationship that doesn't align, or a friendship way too long
Mm-hmm.
with people that are taking advantage of you because you just see them as infinite in God, and they aren't doing that work, and they're just passively taking from you or hurting you. And so there's a shadow to seeing the good in everything. And it's like, see the good in what you're doing and find that as going, and then find what isn't truly you and release it. But, you know, hear what's here too and learn from that too.
Yeah, I think that's something that is it's a constant learning, and it is when you are a person that tries to see the light in everyone that and they don't see it within themselves, it's hard to, I guess, accept is the best word to use. Accept that it's not always going to work that way. Not everyone sees the light in other people or even recognize the light within themselves, and it's so important to take that in. And the life happens for me, not to me, is something that I wanted to touch on because I think it's really important to recognize that you genuinely see life through a different lens. It's like having red sunglasses on, taking the red sunglasses off, and you recognize, oh, there was a tint on at one point. I
Yeah.
remember growing up, I always looked at life. I had the victim mindset, as most people do. Life is happening to me. Life is happening to me. I lost my father and uncle both at 37 years old, and my grandfather passed a few months before his retirement. And I was like,
Wow.
why is this happening to me? Like, why does this keep happening? And there was a moment when I asked myself, how is this happening for me? Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? And genuinely changing the question I asked myself, it prompted a different answer, of course, as our brain works. And my life has changed forever. And so asking a different question and seeing that through a different lens, I wanted to touch on that because it's so, so important. I value your time, and I know that we're getting to the end. So I want to ask one last question that I ask every guest.
Sure.
The question is, what belief are you currently unlearning?
What belief am I currently unlearning? What a great question. The idea that Kyle exists at all.
Mm.
The idea, I mean, and here's a big one. This is going to sound really weird out of context and won't make sense to a lot of people. And you got to know I mean it in a way that's amazing. But there's a way that we hear that person doesn't meet my needs. That person doesn't meet my needs. I got fascinated by what if my needs are the ego's needs? And what if I'm always trying to find what fits what my ego wants? But what if starving it of those things makes it die? And so I've noticed that there is a story of Kyle, and everyone has a story of their name that's based on their past experiences, which mostly came from characters we created to avoid moments of trauma when we were 5. And what if that isn't real? What if the entire story of what I am, I mean, is nothing, and there's no such thing as a separate self at all? And I am watching the slow demise of a separate self. And I know right now that you are talking to yourself right now, right? There is no separate. And the part that creates the separate, like I'm this person and you're this age, or I'm this whatever, those things are things that we fight for as a separate self. There really, as we keep going, is no such thing. And the more we just start, the big, oh, here's another one too. I'm more and more not a fan of only speaking your truth. I'm a much bigger fan of hearing your truth and then speaking whatever you want to share. But there's a lot of people that believe the only way I can get this truth out is if I scream it. And now you have all these egos going, see, I did it. But it's all out of a fear of I don't want to waste my life. But the truth in your body really wants to be seen by you. You're still welcome to share it, but don't think you're imprisoned until you say it. It wants to be heard. So the big switch for me right now is I still will share and do my calls and do my events and everything. But there's a lot of truths in my body that just want to be seen, and then they die. And I realize they weren't truths. They're egoic truths. So there's a lot of people speaking egoic truths, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not necessarily the truth. And I started realizing in this world, there's what's true, meaning like that politician really did say this or do this secretly, or that person said this about you. And then there's the truth, which is what you are and is the the permanent thing that's beyond time, that's infinite. That is the truth, and I'm fascinated by that truth. And everything else that's within the story of Kyle is temporary and doesn't exist. And so you don't have to get caught in the temporary of anything, right? Because it's all passing. Still create, but create from the permanent, and love from the permanent and receive from the permanent. And don't get so caught in the crap between issues with other things and other people. And the charge can go about that because there is no actual you. So I'm unlearning that there even is a Kyle.
It's an amazing unlearning, and I hope that people receive that because that is so important to internalize. It's a learning that I'm continuously trying to unlearn within myself as well. And Kyle, I'm so grateful for your time and your presence and everything that you've put into this world. All of your links will of course be in the show notes. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and can I mention the Absolutely Everything Pass? Would that be okay?
Please, please.
We have our the biggest thing people can find me on, because we do events and the next two are pretty much sold out, but we have a membership site that is the best next step if people want to work. If you liked this and you want to be immersed in this content, we have this Absolutely Everything Pass. It is something that has all of my past courses and live 2-day events. I do a live call every Sunday that you can come on and talk to me. And we do these things. We do hot seats where I put people in a seat and shift them. We do a Wednesday night call where people ask Q&As and I answer things. And there's a backlog of about 1,000 hours of content now. And it's insane. And the biggest comment I hear is it's so expensive to not have the absolutely everything pass, because people make higher decisions and do less addictive things and make better choices and access the level of abundance they are. So for the public, it's 799 or 79 a month. If people here want it, we could make a passcode. And or I'll just say the secret passcode that we already have. It's water. If people go in there and type in water, it'll drop from 799 for a year to 299 for a year. And I bet you anything this will pay for itself in 2 weeks, like financially alone, let alone health and how you are as a parent and a friend and everything else, you know. So it's awesome.
That's awesome. That
So
is awesome.
they could go to absolutely for that. And then where it says promo code, type in the word water and then watch as it drops from 799 to 299, and you got a year, and you can join us on the next call, which is usually like that day or the next day. So we'd love to have you.